Boom. And there we are. And here I am. And it is so good to have you all back. Welcome to the 91st episode of Storytime with Julian. And we're calling this episode, So Was It Good? Well, kinda. Because this is our response show to the first reading from Black Panther Tales of Wakanda, which, if you were here for the pre-read, you already heard my review of it. I wasn't a fan. I'm not going to front. For all the enthusiasm and the excitement that I had for this first story out of what promised to be a really spectacular collection. I wasn't feeling it. I wasn't, for a whole lot of reasons. And if you want to go back on the Storytime with Julian page on Facebook, or even my page, if we're friends on Facebook, you can see what I had to say about it there. Um, I see Latricia is lurking as she goes to get takeout. I see Gwen is here. Good to see you, Gwen. So glad to have you. We got Melanie Monroe in the building. We got Judy Lee here. And I know there's a few others of you that are just going to be in on the quiet tip. And that's all right with me. I get it. You ain't gotta let us know you here, even though I appreciate it so much when you do. You see me keep messing around with my microphone and moving it. I have to rearrange the production desk because everything is in a little bit of chaos right now. Um, before we get into the story, I want to kind of give you guys just a little bit of a heads up and an update. There are definitely some changes happening with Storytime with Julian, and one of them is going to be that we're going to start at some point soon, probably after the 100th episode. We're going to start doing live reads only once a week, and we're going to have shorter pre-recorded reads that you're going to be able to find on the YouTube channel. The live reads will still be available here as well as YouTube, but the shorter pre-recorded joints are going to be happening exclusively on YouTube. Also, we're going to be changing the look and the feel of the show slowly but surely over time so that by the time we hit our second anniversary, it's going to look like a different thing. It's still going to be what you love, but it's going to look like a different thing. So you'll be seeing little changes happening here and there. And I just want you to rock with me as those happen, okay? Looking over to the comments to see if I'm missing anything from anybody. Stephen Boyce is here, and he's saying that now he knows that this is a thing. He will be here. That's what's up. And tell your friends. Matter of fact, all of you who are here under the sound of my voice right now, go on and tag a friend. If you're watching me from Facebook, go on and tag a friend. If you're not watching from Facebook, if you're watching from YouTube, bet. But if you are watching from Facebook, make sure you check out our YouTube channel. Make sure that you subscribe. Why? Finna tell you why. Well, actually, look, our admin is on it. Let's build on YouTube because you can also win books. Because I have been putting together a story time with Julian grab bag. And as soon as we hit 1,000 subscribers, which I'm going to keep it a buck, y'all, it's not hard. 1,000 subscribers isn't hard. I haven't been pushing it hard because I like for things to happen organically, but we could do 1,000 easy. And I want y'all to be a part of making 1,000 happen. But once we hit 1,000 subscribers, I am giving away this grab bag of books. And this grab bag of books has some story time with Julian faves in it. There are a couple of autographed editions in there, but I'm not going to say which books are autographed. But I promise you're going to dig the fact that there are some autographed editions in there. There are some new books that have never been debuted on the show. There's going to be some story time with Julian swag. There's going to be a few things in that you're really going to dig. Now, one lucky person is going to walk away with this bag of books, and as I add to the collection, the value of it keeps growing. I'm gonna just put it like that. But it's absolutely going to be worth your while and worth your time. All right. So subscribe right now. You can go to youtube.com/storytime with Julian. Hit that subscribe button, smash it. Make sure you comment on the video. Every time you comment on a video in YouTube, that counts as an entry, and it's all going to be tallied up and then randomized, and then one lucky person is going to get that bag shipped to them with all the fantastic lit in it, because that's what we do. We support and we promote Black lit. That is the mission of Storytime with Julian. Now, tonight's edition of The Mission, we are going back to Wakanda. We are going back to the book Tales from Wakanda. We are understanding that the first time that we hit this book up did not quite move us and impress us. Some of us, we like the story. It's cool. Political intrigue is good, but the overall vibe was not, come on. I'm not the only one. It wasn't what we were looking for. Now, we're going back because we're not going to judge the book just by that first story. We always give books a second chance. Books are our friends. You give your friends a second chance. You give books a second chance, right? Yes, of course I'm right. I know I'm right. So I want to make sure that in giving this book the second chance it deserves, let's try and give it the best possible offering. We got a shorter short story in here by an author that we know and that we love, Tananarive Due. We have read her many times. We've read some of her horror stuff. We've read some of her less spooky, but still kind of like, supernatural stuff. We know she's got a blessed pen. Yeah? Tananarive Due has a blessed pen for sure. And she has contributed a story to this particular edition. And the title of that story is Return of the Queen by Tananarive Due, as presented in Black Panther Tales from Wakanda. And without a whole lot of other pre-mumble, I just want to dive right into it. And as I read this, y'all, I want to hear, hey, Steven, subscribe. That's what's up, friend. I appreciate that. I appreciate that. As I read from this, I want to see your comments. As you hear me read it, I want your comments and understand, as always, this is a cold read. I've never read this story before. So there's going to be accents required, and there's going to be some Wakandan names and words that I'm going to mispronounce. That's part of the joy of this experience. That's why we share together. Yeah? Yeah. Okay. So everybody settle in, buckle down, let your friends know that this is on. I know that we don't have as big a crowd as we normally do because I didn't do a good job of promoting it, but that's okay. Get tucked in, settle down, get yourself a little sip of something, something. Maybe you want a soda, maybe you want some chamomile, some Earl Grey, whatever's your flavor. Maybe you got some of that red tea, that bush tea that they used to talk about in the First Ladies Detective, the first black lady detective, the Jill Scott show on HBO with the African detective lady. You know what I'm talking about. Anyway, let's see what we got. Let's see what Tananarive brings to us tonight, all right? This is Return of the Queen. You cannot truly know any nation unless your feet have touched her soil, T'Chaka had often said. On long foot treks he had forced his son to endure as a boy, answering T'Challa's complaints about walking so many kilometers when hoverbikes were plentiful. As a prince, he should have chosen from a fleet of hoverbikes. His father was less stern during their long walks, one of the reasons T'Challa had secretly looked forward to these journeys despite his blistered feet. Over the years it seemed they had walked Wakanda from end to end, one tract at a time. As his father had expected, T'Challa learned to value the difference in the texture and color of the grasses in Benin Azaria and the Alkama fields, the crispness of the mountain air in the Jabari lands, the grasslands drenched with the rich golden strawberry hues of dusk. When reporters and researchers asked him to describe his attachment to his homeland, he did not think first as they did of the valuable stores in the vibranium mines, the mystical legacy of the art-shaped herb, or the wonders in his laboratory. He thought of the unparalleled coffee crops and plentiful Cape crows and the beauty of the mighty cascading froth at Warrior Falls he had gazed upon at his father's side. You cannot truly know any nation unless your feet have touched its soil. T'Chaka always finished his adage by saying, just as you cannot know another's heart until you have walked at their side. Today, after only a short afternoon's walk in the midday sun with the Queen of Canaan, T'Challa had learned a lifetime's worth about the neighboring monarchy, not from the woman's grief-drenched words, but from her soil, and from the aged queen's weary walk. The land in the kingdom of Canaan was dead. Dark veins of shadow traversed the soil like uncountable gnarled fingers, making the plain appear as rows of stones. Queen Sojourner Truth, an American expatriate like many of its nation's citizens, at times stumbled across the uneven soil. But even at her advanced age, she was too proud to accept the assistance of T'Challa's subtly outstretched arm. No land in Wakanda had ever been so parched, had ever known drought. As a boy, T'Challa had not realized how little Wakanda resembled the rest of the world, even the nations closest to him. The Mopani trees that shared their borders did not know if they were Wakandan or Canaanite, but Wakanda's soil sang with fertility. Here, dust floated as if the nation itself might blow away in a breeze. Shoot, we saw the drought in South Africa and pitied their dilemma, Queen Truth said. How's that for irony? Shared resources, loans, and then nearly overnight we have the same problem and worse. Even when it rains, the ground soaks it up so fast there's no water left for the crops. It evaporates. Farming is in ruins, of course, but worse, our water supply is dwindling as if it's being sucked beneath the soil. It's just not natural. Of course not, T'Challa agreed. It is an attack. But who was responsible and why? The kingdom of Canaan had a history of turmoil, but Queen Truth's sweeping reforms in recent years, reversing her late father's neglect of health and education, had won it high regard from its neighbors. So this act of war, however it had been achieved, likely had not sprung from close to home. And with the manipulation of water content deep in the soil, even Wakandan technology would have struggled to strike such a devastating blow. T'Challa's panther suit slipped into place across his body as he knelt to touch the soil with his sensor glove. He considered it disrespectful to hide his face behind his suit upon his initial meeting with the Queen, but now he was glad to have it, and not just to analyze the soil. His instincts told him that danger was close. I already have soil samples, brother, Cherie's voice teased in his earpiece. We can compare the sample you take today to the one I have since last week and the week before that. The chide in her voice was obvious. She believed he should have taken more of an interest in Canaan's drought and was late to make a personal visit. He felt a jab of shame at the earlier response to her. How can Wakanda stop a drought? His council was deluged with entreaties from around the globe as seekers and diplomats hoped Wakanda could fix everything from plagues to job crises to civil unrest. And T'Challa had grown uneasy with the implicit promise that intervention would give Wakanda outsized political influence, the beginnings of the superpower notion his father had warned Wakanda to avoid at any cost. T'Challa confessed to himself in Canaan's blazing sun that the drought had not moved him nearly so deeply until he had seen the molested soil with his own eyes. Shuri was right. He should have come sooner. Surely he had power to help Canaan, starting with underground vibranium nets that had helped preserve the groundwater in Wakanda's dry regions. His soil reading from his suit's computer came with a mild ping, 0.00. The fractional water index was nose out 0 for the topsoil, which was to be expected, but this deeper probe at 60 centimeters, then 120 centimeters, should have found some evidence of stored water. Queen Truth was right. It was as if the water were somehow being sucked away. But by whom and how? He whispered. His voice-triggered computer suggested a familiar hologram face. Moses, he whispered. After all, Moses Magnum had once seized control of Canaan. Under his leadership, many more American expatriates like the current queen, named for an American hero who ushered so many from slavery, had moved there. Beside him, Queen Truth sighed. Yes, she agreed, as I feared. An old enemy returns. Naming Moses Magnum was akin to a conjuring. A tremendous crackling sound assailed them, vibrating T'Challa's feet as the soil 20 meters before them parted like two halves of a canyon. Queen Truth gasped and took a step back on the unsteady ground, and T'Challa nudged her back farther still. The Queen's security forces shouted behind them, but T'Challa doubted that those armed men, or even the Dora Milaje, would rid them of the threat they had stumbled upon, or had been led to. If it were not too late, he would have advised the Queen to run. Tell your men to hold their fire, T'Challa said, and she dutifully shouted the words back to her men in Swahili, the sole language her nation had adopted at its creation. Okoye's voice came to T'Challa's earpiece this time. You should pound Magnum to dust, since he enjoys dirt so much. General Okoye and the Dora Milaje and his royal guard were watching from a cliffside perch, far enough away to give T'Challa privacy with Queen Truth, but close enough to watch for trouble. Okoye's breathy voice told him she and the Dora were scrambling to move closer to them, but it was too late for that, too. First we will talk, T'Challa told Okoye. She made a sarcastic sound he barely heard. A figure rose up from the soil as if climbing a staircase from deep underground, and Moses Magnum stood 20 meters before T'Challa, every inch of him caked in red-brown soil, except for his wide smile. Like a giant grinning worm, T'Challa thought. A giant worm with a mohawk haircut, his body encased in Kevlar. Soil instability, his suit's computer warned him inside his helmet. Brother, Shuri began in his ear, alarmed. Yes, T'Challa told her. I know. Diplomacy first, T'Challa reminded himself. He inclined his head in greeting since he had no plans to get close enough to shake Magnum's hands. And once he did get close, it would not be for niceties. How fortunate for you that you are not dead after all, Magnum, T'Challa said, the politest words he could muster. I keep hearing reports. Ah, you faced a few of your own trials, King T'Challa, Magnum said. But what's the saying? You can't keep a good man down. Impossibly, his grin widened. You are banned from this nation, Queen Truth shouted. We order you to leave at once, and you will immediately cease your unconscionable sabotage against us. Magnum's laughter convulsed in his belly. I'm sorry, he said when his fit had passed. It's it's just so ridiculous, this unarmed old woman trying to give me orders. He gestured to invite T'Challa into the joke. I mean, look at her, man. She's a flea giving orders to. T'Challa reached Magnum with his superpowered vault before he could complete the vile insult. Magnum barely had time to comprehend, his eyes widening with surprise as T'Challa gave him a powerful shove in his chest with the heels of both hands. Despite Okoye's advice, T'Challa did not release his full power for fear of snapping the man's ribcage and stopping his heart cold. He had to know more about his process of evaporating water, or Wakanda might not be able to reverse it. But T'Challa also misjudged Magnum's Kevlar, which could absorb bullets, as well as a panther blow. Magnum flew end over end, landing with a pained howl 30 meters away, but the blow itself had not even rendered him unconscious. T'Challa, Okoye said, you must stop him before. T'Challa vaulted again, this time falling short by less than an elephant's length as he watched Magnum sit upright and shake his head, dazed, barely out of T'Challa's reach. That damnable grin came again, Magnum's teeth painted in fresh blood this time. Magnum held up his index finger, mocking T'Challa, then lowered his finger to touch the ground. His grin was locked like iron. Magnum, no! T'Challa shouted. An odd popping sound assaulted T'Challa's ears, a deafening tone that vibrated his eardrum. The earth trembled and flung him away, and then sucked him down. Then, for a time, only the dark. No light. His ears still rang, but there was no sound. Even in his panther suit, T'Challa could not move. T'Challa tasted soil in his mouth. For an instant he wondered if he had returned to death's domain. He had always known he would soon return, as all people must. Only Okoye's voice in his ear, slightly distorted, told him that he was alive. Don't worry, we'll dig you out, Okoye said. T'Challa mustered his suit's energy stores and felt himself bob slightly. He could at least clench his fist for a moment, but then he was trapped again. If anything, he might be deeper underground. He might as well be encased in iron. He did not dare try to use his suit for extraction again. T'Challa saw the blue light inside his helmet indicating that his oxygen reserves were running, as he had carefully designed for water emergencies. The air feeding his nostrils was cold and sterile. His suit would produce oxygen for at least 12 hours, which would give the Dora Milaje plenty of time to dig him out. Magnum's tutelage under Mad Mutant Dictator Apocalypse had given him much greater powers than he had during his days as an arm dealer, hoping to overrun Wakanda. In those days, he had tried to destabilize the kingdom of Canaan to get closer to taking Wakanda. Since then, T'Challa had heard of Magnum's ability to move the earth, but this was his first personal demonstration. It was a terrible and enviable ability indeed. The Queen, T'Challa inquired, anxious. She's alive, Okoye said. Luckily, she was just beyond the worst damage. Magnum meant only to assassinate you, it seems. The drought might have been a trap, at least in part. Oxygen reserves. Please refrain from speech, his censor said. Brother, save your breath, Shuri echoed. The oxygen stream thinned and T'Challa's lungs clenched, uneasy. But he had to ask. Where is Magnum? T'Challa said, softly, expending little of his breath. Gone, Okoye said. We've mapped a warren of underground tunnels, but he's not showing on our sensors. Do not chase him, T'Challa said. In the long silence, T'Challa wondered if his comms had failed. I'm wasting breath to say it twice, T'Challa said. Let him go for now. Yes, my king, Okoye said, although he could imagine the irritation creasing her brow. After such a brazen assassination attempt, the Dora Milaje would not rest until Magnum was captured, or more likely, dead. But a direct confrontation was too risky, especially with such a small contingent, not even a dozen. The Dora were fierce, but they were human. But a man who could swallow you into the soil with a touch was not entirely human. T'Challa would need more planning from Moses Magnum. To chase him without research and strategy would be a grave folly. He was lucky he had not been killed. Trapped in his intended grave, helpless against the weight of the soil, T'Challa felt small for the first time since he could remember. Smaller than in his boyhood days, walking in his father's shadow. He was the flea Magnum had laughed at, and probably was laughing at still. But Magnum would not be laughing long. In the soil's prison, T'Challa's hidden thoughts whispered the real reason he remembered his long walks with his father, the single memory he'd tried to bury beneath all the rest. When he was a teenager, as part of more rigorous training for the crown, his father had sent him out to walk alone, and that walk had led to an unforgettable meeting. Shuri's voice chirped in his ear, nearly hidden in the audio feed as Okoye and the king's bodyguards gave orders from the frenzied digging above him. Brother, Shuri said, do you promise not to be angry? Silence means yes. T'Challa did not answer, but he was making no such promise. Emboldened, Shuri went on. When I saw the earlier soil readings the Queen sent us, I knew we needed help. I also knew you'd be too proud to ask. Since you are pinned under the ground, this is a good time to tell you I've already called for help. The Avengers? T'Challa wondered. We might need the entire army of them. And she is flying to Wakanda as we speak, Shuri went on. Only one helper? But the note of mischief in Shuri's voice gave away the answer. T'Challa's heart flurried against his breastbone as if it could free itself, a sensation that would have felt like fear if he had not understood its true origin. He did not have to ask Shuri whom she had called. Her name came to his lips in a whisper. Ororo. As she soared high, Aurora raised her body temperature so her eyelashes would not freeze and her hair would not whip her face like the ice its pale strands so closely mimicked. Clouds fanned in the mist across her skin as she made a playful loop through a mountainous cumulonimbus clouds, gaping whole with a shriek of delight. She built the clouds as she flew, hardly aware of how they bloomed behind her as she streaked the sky. She would never tire of it. Of all her gifts, none brought her joy like flight. For years, spoiled by worship and effortless talents that were feared even by her most powerful foes, Aurora had taken her gifts for granted. But when Forge had stripped her of her powers, betraying both her love and her allyship, she had missed none more than her ability to take flight above the world, away from the chaotic din, free of confinement in rooms or buildings or nations or obligations. Being grounded had felt like death, and after a time, her gift of flight had been the first to return. Long leaps at first, then rocket like dashes straight up for longer and longer intervals. Her greatest love had returned to her even before she rekindled her mastery of weather that had earned her the code name Storm. She would never take flying or freedom for granted again. Ororo did not worry for T'Challa's safety after Shuri's report. His suit would protect him, but she couldn't imagine enduring his fate. Nothing had erased the paralyzing claustrophobia that gripped her when she was trapped in small spaces, the long shadow that had trailed her since childhood. Even a goddess must have a weakness. A seer in a shopping mall in Nairobi had once told her with a sly wink of her eye. Aurora's joy shrank as she descended, the earth's myriad colors piercing the clouds. Below her, Wakanda was a verdant jewel. No other nation seemed to gleam from the sky. As Storm, Aurora could toss away opponents like paper, but memories were harder to fight. Once she had been the queen of Wakanda, serving at T'Challa's side. Once they had both been foolish teenagers seeing themselves in a mirror for the first time, his royalty and her powers blending from the moment they had met when he was abducted in Kenya during a ceremonial walkabout. Instant love neither of them had forgotten. Once their wedding served as a joyous truce in the midst of a civil war. But so long ago. Now she was a visitor to Wakanda, or worse, a stranger. He childishly had blamed her for her destruction she had not caused, believing she had betrayed Wakanda when she allied herself with the X-Men team rather than the Avengers. T'Challa's cold words that terrible day still raked her belly. Please don't come here again. Well, she was coming. Shuri and Ramonda had begged her return, but not soon enough. The parched lands in Canaan were visible from above, too, stark grays and browns, stripped of the colors of growth and life. A petty monster like Moses Magnum had no right to suck any nation's land dry. But Aurora was especially incensed that he had done it to try to hurt Wakanda, where once she had reigned as queen. To try and kill T'Challa. Storm let out another shriek, this time to direct her clouds with even more speed, to bloat their darkening bellies with moisture, to bid lightning bolts to flare a fiery duel in the sky. Below her, the kingdom of Canaan sang with the sound of driving rain. And we will root them out. T'Challa's voice came, forceful, floating through the corridor leading to his war room with the Dora Milaje. Aurora could not keep the smile from her face as she approached the doorway with Shuri and Ramonda. Flanked by her sister and mother, with so little family the term in-law held no meaning, and her heart would never annul this bright, fierce girl or her wise, regal mother. Aurora felt once again part of a royal processional. In her mind, she was draped in a two-layered peacock-colored ceremonial robe like the one Ramonda had worn to greet her. Ramonda held up her hand to halt Aurora's entrance before she would be visible. He will want the reunion to be private, Ramonda said. When Shuri started to object, Ramonda leveled the sharp gaze Aurora remembered, well, as powerful as a lightning bolt, using only the angle of her eyes. We won't create a spectacle, Shuri. Not in front of the Dora. Okay. That was weird. So my phone just rang, and I'm using my phone as my camera, and I forgot to put on Do Not Disturb. And people who know good and damn well that I should be on my show right now are calling me, but that's okay. We're going to run that back. He will want the reunion to be private, Ramonda said. When Shuri started to object, Ramonda leveled the sharp gaze Aurora remembered well, as powerful as a lightning bolt, using only the angle of her eyes. Damn it! Okay. I'm going to keep going. I'm really sorry about that, y'all. Hang on. I can't if I stop this to turn the do not disturb on, it's just going to I we're just going to keep it going. I'm sorry, y'all. I am so irritated right now. Let me gather myself. We won't create a spectacle, Shuri. Not in front of the Dora. What spectacle? Shuri whispered. She's here to help us plan the counterattack. This one, Ramonda tisked, indicating Shuri with feigned irritation. Shuri, do you know your brother at all? You saw his mood when he returned from Canaan. T'Challa's voice rose with anger. Scour freedom from end to end, no matter where he emerges from his lowly hiding place. T'Challa did not often sound so angry. Aurora shivered away with the memory of T'Challa's eyes when he had sent her away, beyond anger to cool indifference. Shuri and Ramonda had invited Aurora to Wakanda without T'Challa's blessing, and for the first time, She doubted a happy reception. Aurora never would have done anything to harm Wakanda, but her allegiance to the X-Men had torn her and T'Challa apart after he blamed her team for flooding and incalculable damage in Wakanda. Aurora had known T'Challa since they were both practically children, and his eyes that day had been so foreign to her. Since he sent her away, Aurora had matched his anger with her own. How dare he not trust her? How dare he blame her for the actions of others? But today, Aurora felt only a novel nervousness speeding her heart, as if she was a young girl again. She sorely missed the freedom and the power she had felt in the skies. Brother, she's here. We're just outside. Shuri's finger was pressed to her ear's communication device. T'Challa's voice stopped cold. His quick footsteps approached. Deep breath, daughter, Ramonda said quietly, knowing Aurora's heart. He needs you. Aurora smiled at the word daughter. She had been called Storm, Goddess, Angel, Demon. So rarely, so briefly, had she known the title daughter. Aurora returned Ramonda's squeeze, although a bit more tightly. Aurora was hand in hand with Ramonda when T'Challa ducked out of the doorway and saw her. He could not hide his startlement, the anger etched in his jaw melting to slack, awe, as if he could not believe his eyes. He looked at her first, then at Ramonda, as if for confirmation that he had not imagined the sight of her, and then at Shuri, who was smirking. I've brought you a one-person army, Shuri said. You're welcome. I think we have business elsewhere, Ramonda told Shuri. What business? Shuri said, and then smiled playfully. Ah, elsewhere, of course. Shuri slipped into the war room to join the Dora. Ramonda cast an encouraging smile over her shoulder at Aurora as she turned to leave them alone in the corridor, which was adorned with vibranium-enhanced spears in decorative colors. T'Challa's gaze returned to Aurora. He might be the one called Storm, the way his emotions swam so furiously across his eyes, admiration, longing, shame, regret. But no disappointment, no fury. That past was gone. She noticed a small clump of soil tangled in the coils of his hair and gently brushed it away. Habit. Aurora, he said. His voice was a mere breath. He cupped her elbows in his warm palms. Welcome home. A hush fell over the door of Malaje as T'Challa returned to the war room with Aurora at his side, walking with him pace for pace down the center aisle as she had at state functions as his queen. Okoye could hardly keep her eyes in her head, staring with such scrutiny. In the days after T'Challa annulled his marriage to Aurora, Okoye had been his voice of encouragement to drown out the endless objections from Shuri and Ramonda. You did the right thing, T'Challa. She was never wedded to a Kanda. You cannot predict which way a tree split in two might fall. But now T'Challa's stomach churned with the acidic doubts that had stolen his sleep in the weeks that after he sent her away. A dozen times he had nearly summoned her until the churning finally stilled, and he convinced himself that he had been right to sacrifice his heart for Wakanda. But he had not realized how flimsy the wall around his heart was until Aurora returned, her mesmerizing silver hair framing her face, and those enchantress's eyes. Time swept away, and he felt like a boy in the presence of his first, his only, love again. No other existed like Aurora. Aurora walked with confidence, ignoring the gazes of wonder and shock. Please continue the meeting, Aurora said. Don't let me interrupt. Instead of joining Shuri and the fully assembled Dora, Aurora kept her place beside T'Challa as he faced his royal guard. Okoye's chin was lowered in a pointed stare at him and at the break in protocol. Watching, Shuri struggled to keep the grin from her face. As I was saying, T'Challa began, and cleared his throat for a deeper timbre. As I was saying, our intelligence reveals that Moses Magnum has assembled an army of his own, hidden in underground tunnels along Wakanda's border, not unlike tunnels between the ancient churches in his homeland of Ethiopia. I assumed he had planned to assassinate me and then take advantage of the leadership vacuum to try and mount a larger attack. I also assume he has developed a new weapon to try and take Wakanda. Agreed, Ororo said. In his dreams, he's Tony Stark, always bringing new toys. Their apparent encampment may only be another trap, T'Challa said. So we will identify his capabilities, and we will wait until dawn to counter. Your Highness, Okoye objected. We are ready to counter now. This attack is the talk of the world. The video of you being dug up out of the soil like a dinosaur bone has gone viral. Our enemies are rejoicing. A late response makes Wakanda and you look weak. The truly strong have no fear of looking weak, Ororo said before T'Challa could answer, mirroring his own thoughts. Wakanda does not make decisions based on appearances and silly social media. Let them rejoice. Our enemies will be quaking again soon enough. The Dora Milaje stirred and grumbled, shocked, even as they kept their voices low to avoid disrespecting T'Challa. Ororo, speaking for Wakanda, and she had used the term our enemies, as if their marriage had never been annulled. T'Challa gently patted the small of Ororo's back to caution her to be more diplomatic. Your objection is noted, Okoye, T'Challa said. All such talks from our enemies will cease in the light of day. Ramonda's royal feast welcoming Aurora was hastily planned and held at a late hour, but most of the council members were in attendance, it seemed only to gawk. T'Challa sat side by side with Aurora at the head of the table, as he always had, their fingers intertwined. For the moment, thoughts of Moses Magnum gave way to delight over Aurora's touch, both discovery and treasured memory in this odd moment that lived in both the present and the past. And what of the future? The thought came unbidden, surprising T'Challa so much that he glanced at Ramonda as if she might have planted the thought herself. Ramonda seemed to know, smiling at him with eyes as she sipped her Nigerian palm wine. And what a feast it was! The Wakandan specialties of lamb and spiced rice were aromatic on the table, of course, but his chefs had studied throughout the continent, had also prepared jollof rice, plantains, goat, fufu, collard greens, Kenyan crunchy bananas, Ramonda's favorite, shakalaka relish from South Africa, and of course, Egyptian specialties like pigeon and the national dish of the moholia soup honoring Aurora's birthplace. Even with short notice, Wakandan chefs did not disappoint. Ramonda rang her glass with her spoon and rose to her feet. The hum of conversation vanished. A toast, she said, raising her glass, in honor of the return of my other daughter, Aurora, known to the world as Storm. I could not be prouder at how she has lived up to her name. All eyes went to T'Challa first, to see if he would honor the toast. He gave Aurora a quick glance and saw her fragile smile as she waited too. Aurora was fearsome on the battlefield, but she seemed as tentative as he at navigating her heart. To put her at ease, T'Challa also stood up. He turned to Aurora with his glass raised. Yes, he said, to the return of Aurora to Wakanda. We have missed you. Shuri let out an amused chuff at the word we, a deflection, but the sound mostly was lost in the affirmations of the rest of the council that felt obliged to join the toast. Several members wore tight smiles that betrayed their objections. The council, like the Dora Milaje, had supported his annulment of this marriage. In fact, some believed he never should have married her at all. I have missed you, T'Challa corrected himself. He clinked Aurora's glass. Aurora's entire face seemed to glow as brightly as her hair. And me, you, she said. Your Highness. With her eyes on him, the rest of the room seemed to vanish. T'Challa invited Aurora into his chamber as he pored over the intelligence spouting from his computer. Troop locations, body scans, geological disturbances in Canaan. His mind never left the screen, but every inch of his skin was aware that Aurora stood close to him. A warm blanket seemed to have fallen over both of them. Even their breathing was synchronized. Magnum's troops seemed to be confined to Canaan, which was good, but implied that sympathizers within that nation had allowed his presence. T'Challa's suit had detected no lies from Queen Sojourner Truth, so for now he must believe that she had been caught by surprise as much as he. Perhaps Magnum had triggered the drought so that the Canaanites would feel dissatisfaction with her leadership, softening up Canaan for a coup to bolster his plans to try and take Wakanda again. Magnum had ruled there for a time, and surely would like to regain his power. But what is his actual weapon? T'Challa mused aloud. Aurora moved beside him only slightly, but his arm felt a flame near hers. He was aware of her every motion and gesture. Whatever he used to parch the land, she guessed. That would be enough to destabilize Canaan, yes, he said, but not Wakanda. He would need a much more powerful force. He turned his eyes to Aurora then, as if he had called her by name. You are a distraction, Aurora, he said, a greater one than I have never known. She pinned her lips, part hurt, part irritation. Then I'll leave your chamber, she said. Wake me for the fight. I have another idea, he said. Most of what distracts me is not knowing. Not knowing what, T'Challa? Instead of answering, he touched her chin. Not knowing if I may kiss you. Aurora's face softened again, her smile turning girlish. I was wondering the same thing. But you have entanglements. T'Challa refused to bring her reputed lover's name to his lips. Over the years, T'Challa had trained himself to avoid any thoughts of him or any of the other X-Men in the family she had chosen. Do I? Playfully, Aurora examined the chamber, which was emptied except for his bed and the Wakandan fabrics and treasures he had decorated every inch of the space with. I see no entanglements here. Do you? They kissed. The sensation was like tumbling headfirst back into his boyhood. Even his palms were sweaty as they had been the first time he kissed Aurora. He saw the sensations mirrored in Aurora's face. And what of your entanglements? She said. Is there another Aurora? That would be impossible, he said. There is only one. They kissed again, hardly aware they passed a precious hour in each other's arms, an hour closer to dawn. Long after midnight, T'Challa sat up with his mind afire. Inspiration. Magnum's troops are a distraction, he said. That's where he wants me to focus. But I've scanned their weapons and they are unremarkable. Nothing like the dome he once used against Wakanda. The troops themselves are ordinary. Hardly 100 of them. No match for the Dora, whether I was dead or alive. They are not the invading force. They are for show. They are meant to march in only after. After what? Wakanda is too well fortified for his earthquakes. Yes, and with an earthquake too powerful, he would be worried about burying the vibranium stores. Vibranium is all he truly wants. All the world wants, Aurora mused. T'Challa went to his computer again. It was synced to his suit, but when he wasn't armored, he sat at his desk to type in a flurry on his keyboard. Had he missed something in his scans? Without questions about Aurora jamming his fevered mind, T'Challa noticed unusual sonic fluctuations as he reviewed the data from his confrontation with Magnum. Hadn't he felt a strange popping sensation in his ears, even with his suit? It's sonic, he realized, sharing his thoughts aloud. He triggered a tone. The earthquake made it seem trivial, but if I could feel my ears pop even inside the armor, imagine what a tone might do to... Of course, Aurora said, joining his side again. Her hand slid across his shoulder as if it had never left. With you dead, he might expect a sonic weapon to overwhelm your fighters, and he knows we will go back to face him. There is nothing to stop him from using both earthquakes and his new weapon to try and thwart our counterattack. Nothing except us, Aurora said. Their minds were one. They would not summon the Dora, or even Shuri. They would not wait until dawn. They would answer Magnum's attack tonight, alone, together. T'Challa had forgotten how love, or even the memory of it, lifted his heart and spirit. His heartbeat seemed to propel his flight as he soared high over Wakanda's great mound, hand in hand with Aurora. But the power was hers, of course. She was manipulating the electromagnetic field to propel him as if he shared her ability to fly, and they rose and dipped as one. The full moon glowed across Aurora's wildly billowing hair, as if the strands had captured its light. What a wondrous sight they must be to a sleepless child staring at them high above through his window. She glanced at him, sharing his nearly giddy joy. He could barely remember the man he had been when he sent her away, so devastated by damage to Wakanda, blaming himself. But he only knew how to channel his rage toward Aurora, whom even the Panther God had blessed as his mate. Did he believe he had known better than the Panther God? Had he any right to annul a union that had been blessed? In his cowardice, he had told Aurora that the high priest had annulled their marriage, when they both knew he himself wore that mantle, as well as King. He had shorn himself in the 2 days he sent her away. And now? He had shorn himself in two the day he sent her away. And now? T'Challa's comms inside his armor lit up in red from an emergency message. Brother, Shuri's voice came. Why does my scan show you've left the Golden City and you are 10,000 feet in the air without a jet? You'll know why, T'Challa said. His smile was obvious in his voice. You called her. I called her to help, not to lead you to. I am leading myself, T'Challa said. We know what Magnum is up to. We will make sure he never troubles Wakanda again. Don't wake Okoye. You think I'm sleeping? Okoye's voice broke in. After Magnum buried Wakanda's king like a pile of rubbish. We'll meet you. No one will meet me, T'Challa said. That's an order. I'll tell you when it's done. He silenced the communications channel so he wouldn't suffer through complaints. Instead, he activated his holographic map of Canaan that showed him the system of tunnels Magnum had created near his border. Magnum glowed as a green dot on the map. He was on the surface after all. Apparently, he preferred the comfort of a bed rather than however his troops were being forced to sleep underground. He had created a shelter and was so sure of his new weapon's capabilities that he dared to sleep in the open. He must not see us approach, T'Challa told Aurora. Of course. Do you think I'm a child again? Aurora said. Even her mild irritation was a happy, familiar memory now. To his sensors, we only look like a large bird. You fly like a child, T'Challa teased her, as if we are on our way to play, not war. War is play, Aurora said, when it's done right. With a laugh, Aurora began her steep descent, plunging them nearly straight down like an amusement park's roller coaster. If not for his suit's equilibrium, his stomach would have plunged into his throat. A cement cottage with a steel roof came into view before them, newly constructed. T'Challa offered Aurora 2 Kamoyo beads he had fashioned into earrings for her. Here, wear these. Your hearing won't be impaired, but they should block any sonic waves. Should, she said, hesitating. Absolutely, without a doubt. Should. With a mock frown, Aurora slid the earrings in place and parted her hair for him to inspect them. How do they look? She said. Not as beautiful as the woman wearing them, he said, but they look perfect. They are Wakandan after all. Mine to keep, I hope. Of course. Satisfied, Aurora stopped their descent. They still floated high over Magnum's rooftop. Then it's time to huff and puff, she said, and raised her arms, and blow this house down. A sudden windstorm below them stirred the brush and soil still damp from Aurora's earlier rainstorm, rattling the cottage's window panes. Rapidly, the wind screamed to hurricane intensity until the jeep parked outside turned over and Magnum's roof whipped away in sheets. Clothing, paper, and other items inside danced wildly in the gale. Magnum stood in the shell that remained, his arms raised to protect his face. Then, just as quickly, Storm's wind died away. Magnum's arms dropped down as he stared up at them. "Come out, Magnum!" T'Challa called down. "You are hereby charged with an attempt to assassinate the King of Wakanda." T'Challa shone his spotlight down on Magnum, who was ready for them, fully armored. His grin gleamed in the light. "Back for more, T'Challa. Did you see? Your videos had 50 million views, and in only a few hours. Tell your men to surrender. Lives need not be lost." "You mean these men?" Magnum said. A hole opened in the soil behind the cottage, and Magnum's troops ran out, guns ready. Column after column emerged, not unlike ants. "I'm gonna make you a star, T'Challa," Magnum said. "Let's see if we can get even more hits with this video." He raised his voice for his troops. "Ready! Aim! Fire!" Before he could finish, Magnum let out a startled yell as he found himself floating on the wind, yanked upward toward T'Challa as Storm levitated him. "If they fire at us, they fire at you," Storm said. "Up here you are helpless," T'Challa reminded him. "You can't shake the earth without touching it. Now you will stand trial in Wakanda." "Oh no, I'm not helpless," Magnum said, and he pushed a button on a handheld device T'Challa could only see now that Magnum was so close to him. Again, T'Challa's ears popped and a ringing sound squeezed his eardrums. Aurora let out a cry, and suddenly they were all diving toward the ground 50 meters below. "Fool!" T'Challa said. "If she falls, we all fall." His panther suit would protect him from the fall, but he must take pains to protect Aurora. If Magnum perished, so be it. "No one will fall," Aurora said, her teeth gritted as she regained control. She looked at her head, she shook her head as if to clear it, and they floated steadily again, then rose slightly. She glared at T'Challa. "These Wakandan earrings, though, they are not yet perfect." T'Challa grabbed Magnum's shoulders harder than intended, his panther claw sinking past Magnum's armor to his skin and beyond to tendons. Aurora's cry of pain had enraged him, and now Magnum's cry answered for it as he writhed in pain. "You will never have control of Canaan or Wakanda," T'Challa told Magnum. "You'll be locked away so long no one will remember you." T'Challa headbutted Magnum, leaving the man floating limply, unconscious. Or could he be dead? T'Challa was not certain at first, but his suit sensors read Magnum's feeble heartbeat. T'Challa yanked the handheld control from Magnum's hand, careful not to press the button. He and Shuri would study to learn how Magnum harnessed the power to try and disable Wakandan forces. Gunshots rang out below, and T'Challa angled himself so the troops' bullets grazed his suit, missing Aurora. One errant bullet bloomed red on Magnum's sleeve. "You're shooting your own man, you fools!" T'Challa shouted down. "Enough!" Aurora said, and she summoned a new wind. Below them 100 troops were tumbled, scattered and helpless. T'Challa wished he had not wasted so much of his evening with Aurora, plotting how to defeat such worthless paper dolls. They were not worthy of this fight. When she and T'Challa were low enough to avoid killing Magnum, Aurora allowed him to drop in a tangled heap, another human tumbleweed. That left only the two of them still airborne. Two warriors with no battle to fight, except perhaps one. T'Challa retracted his panther mask so Aurora could see his face. "I've missed this." The words lay just beneath his tongue. "Come back to Wakanda. Take your rightful place as queen. I was impetuous and short-sighted. No other woman belongs at my side." But it was Aurora who spoke first. "You were right, T'Challa. Somehow you knew even before I knew myself. T'Challa's unspoken words withered. I was right about what? Moonlight revealed grim lines in Aurora's face despite her smile. You always knew who you were born to be. You told me when we were young, and I envied your confidence, but me, I I've had many lives, many nations, never a home. I could not have been a proper queen, not the queen Wakanda deserves. I see that now. Maybe it's a curse that comes with this gift of flight. I can never stay in one place long. I only dreamed I could because I love you so. If the stone in T'Challa's stomach had actual weight, it would have driven him to the ground, separating them. Soon that stone would melt to acid and burn him while he slept. But not yet. In a corner of his mind, he wondered if Aurora was truly speaking her heart, or only telling him what she thought he needed to hear. Then I made a wise choice, T'Challa said, his words more certain than his voice. But it is best if it is our choice, Aurora. Not past tense, present, now, tonight. Yes, Aurora said at last. A mutual choice is always the best choice. Aurora clasped his hands. They probed each other's eyes until each of them was certain they could find no hidden glimmers of truth and no more questions except the ones that neither of them could answer. The future was a mysterious and unknowable territory. They might or might not travel together. Aurora's eyes were dancing gray flames, hypnotic. A year might have passed before a few of Magnum's men's half weakened, groaning below them. Magnum would sleep much longer. Thank you for your help, Aurora, T'Challa said. The Dora can clean up the rest. Still clasping hands, they floated face to face, framed before the liquid moon. The Dora would have been fine without me. You could have given them all earrings, or something better. But I could not resist a chance to see Wakanda. It's lovely this time of year. T'Challa quirked an eyebrow at her. Hey, every time of year. Aurora smiled, although T'Challa thought he might see a tear in the corner of her eye. No lies detected. But do Wakandans have to be the cockiest people on the planet? You know, T'Challa began, I am a very important king. My obligations keep me busy. A king never has a day of rest, and then you add the distress calls. This ruler here, another ruler there. The Avengers always calling on me to help save the world. He paused. But I can't think of a single reason I need to go back home tonight or tomorrow. Her pause was endless. Who was the cocky one now? She was thinking it over. It is a shame to waste such a pretty moon, Aurora said finally. Where shall we go, my queen? Wherever we land, she smiled, holding him captive with her eyes. My king. As rain drummed against Canaan's thirsty soil, Aurora and T'Challa flew. And thus endeth the story. You all have just heard Return of the Queen by Tananarive Due, as presented in Black Panther, Tales from Wakanda. And yeah. All right, so that's our second shot. Let me go back. I'm going to check the comments and see what y'all said, see how y'all felt about it. Let's see. So Latricia was excited that we had some tea-do. I like that. When I struggle with the pronunciation, I might have to rest on that one. I like it. I like it. I like it. And we see we had Taylor Marsh join us. What's happening, Taylor? Good to have you. Let's see. Angel Monique pulled out this particular line, just as you cannot truly know another's heart until you've walked at their side. Yeah, that was nice. That whole little moment with T'Chaka and young T'Challa was nice. It'll be interesting to see if we get more of that in some of the other versions of Wakandan stories that are coming out, through the different media outlets. That relationship was dope. Steven knew what was coming. I'm not sure at what point we were in the story, but he already saw it coming. And so did Latricia, which is what's up. And yes, that is the queen that is returning. Oh, thank you, Trutina. Trutina said, "Don't be frustrated. Just glad to be able to catch part of the show. It's always great to listen to you. Thank you so much. I hope you're still here to hear my appreciation. I appreciate that encouragement. You know, I put a lot of work into trying to make the show smooth and as professional as it can be. I mean, I'm doing this from the side of my room at the crib, but it's important to me to make this experience as seamless and as thorough and enjoyable as possible. And I do tend to get frustrated when things go wrong, as they will. And I'm saying all that to say that while my need for something as close to perfection will always rankle me a little bit, I am eternally grateful for all of your continued patience with me and with this program, with us, as we try to develop it and grow it and make it the kind of experience that you are proud and excited to share with more and more of your friends and with your people. So thank you for being patient with me. Latricia said, "Who here saw the animated Black Panther series that Reginald Hutland produced some years ago?" Me, I did. Matter of fact, I've got it. That's the imagery I get with this story. Okay. Not a dinosaur. Yeah, that was kind of cold. And I I like that the MCU kind of gave us contextual relevance for the whole social media impact Wakanda has outside and the impact of social media within Wakanda. What are those? Like all of that kind of set us up for some of the modernisms. It's weird, but I think this is kind of a trope that we fall into if you're a reader of fantasy. Things that are set in distant lands, we almost want to pull back from time, even though we know Wakanda's technology and everything about them makes them much more in the realm of Afrofuturism. So um, but we expect them to have almost a bit of a separation from the reality as we know it. So reading phrases like 50 million views and video went viral and I'm gonna make you famous kind of threw me. But I think that Tananarive do really handled it well, making Wakanda exactly what it's intended to be, a product of its current time as well as a product of its supernatural nature. um that menu was nice, right? Like it's been a minute since I've had some good jollof rice, and I really, really, really missed all my fam in Brooklyn when I was reading that. There was a lot of those things on that menu. I was like, damn, I haven't had that in like legit a decade. It's been like 10 years since I've had some of those things. Apparently, war is foreplay. Yeah, if you do it right, right? Um, it's good to see Angela Lee Rains here. Glad to see you. And Angel Monique says that Tanana Reeve has redeemed the lituation. I see you trying to coin it. I like it. I like it. I like it. Steven says that he's just getting into streaming and the technical issues can be frustrating. Bruh, listen, we gonna let's me and you chat because we got to do a crossover episode at some point, right? I feel like we got to, yeah. Let's holla. Let's holla. Let's see what we can do about that. But yeah, man, the technical difficulties can be mad frustrating. So listen, so what do y'all think? We are now 2 stories in on this. We've had we had our opening story, which was Kindred Spirits, and we've had this story, Return of the Queen. I I think how I feel about this story is pretty obvious. I think that this story had a lot of redemptive value. It also did. I will say this: reading some of what Tananarive did at the earlier parts of the story helps contextualize some of what Maurice Brodus did with his story. It is very clear to me that they are taking some of the real issues that are facing different nations in Africa, and they are putting them at the center of these stories. Now, how deep they intend to go with them, I think it appears to have been the choice of each author. But it occurs for me that what this book is doing, in addition to sort of expanding on the mythology of Black Panther and of Wakanda, is really, kind of ringing the bell for some of the shit that's actually going on in Africa. The colonialism of China in various African nations, specifically the economic colonialism, the way that was, for whatever misgivings I may have had about Maurice Brodus's story, he took a really fine pen to that and made sure to outline that in real stark contrast. Like, this is what's going on. China's going in there, they're putting a bunch of so-called resources into it, and then they are basically giving them these bubble loans that they know these nations aren't going to be able to pay off. And then bam, now we own this land, we own this resource, we run this resource. That was not fiction. When we read that last week, that was not fiction. That part of the story was realer than real. And here, looking at the what's happening with the leaching of way of water resources. Now, we never really did get to the bottom of what Moses Magnum was doing and how he was doing it. However, we do know that companies like Nestle Water are indeed they are buying water rights from different nations that have very little to offer, and they are pulling the water, literally pulling the water out there. Coca-Cola does this too, pulling the water out of there, leaving these nations bereft of any kind of water, literally putting them in the situation of drought so that they can bottle and sell water to other nearby parts of the world. That shit is insane, but it is in fact happening in real life. And so the work that is being done to kind of shed lights on some of these dark spots, I think is really dope. I am therefore curious to see what else I don't know if this was, 2 is a coincidence, 3 is a pattern. Now, we're not going to read this next week. I am going to pick a story that's probably too long for the show and just give it a good personal read and see how I feel about it. And I will report back to y'all if we feel like this is a pattern. But should this book now, let's see, I see that Judy Lee says that it has redeemed the lituation, and it looks like that coinage is actually happening. So should this book be back in your good graces and something that you feel like you want to buy from your local Black bookstore, I would encourage you, first of all, I always like to show the cover. This is what it looks like. Black Panther, Tales of Wakanda. And the editor is Jesse J. Holland, in case you're having a hard time finding it. Understand, this is a hardback. It's a thick one. I think this is normally priced around $25. It is increasingly difficult to find, I will tell you that much. But I believe that our good friends over at Harriet's will, if they don't have it in stock, they will order it for you and find it for you. We're going to try and post a link up to them a little bit later on. And listen, y'all, we are about at time. Like, this is it. We hit 11:15 2 minutes ago. Excuse me. I didn't get myself any water before I began. I do not have time to do the after story tonight. The after story will be back by Thursday. Do keep in mind that we're kind of keeping things a little bit loose as we grow and develop and change the show and the format. So understand, there are going to be times I'm not going to do a promo. If I don't tell you I'm not doing it, assume we're here, roll through, bring your friends. Let's get the band back together. I love doing this with y'all. I love doing this for y'all. Let's keep it black. Let's keep it lit. And I will see you on Thursday. This has been Storytime with Julian. Thank you so much, Latricia, Angel, Judy, Steven, everybody for commenting. I look forward to seeing you on Thursday. That's it, y'all. We're going to go ahead and play our little closeout. No credits tonight. We'll see if I get some on by Thursday. All right, y'all. Peace.